I found a British edition of Polly the Party Fun Fairy, so here are all the changes between the original British version and the American version. In the illustration, Sweet Shop is changed to Candy Shop. Greenwood is changed from one word to two words. In the opening poem, Throughout All Fairyland becomes Throughout All of Fairyland. Shine Your Wand and Press Your Dress becomes Pull Out Your Wand in Fanciest Dress. HRH, meaning Her Royal Highness, is removed from the fairy godmother's name. Chapter 1. Mum becomes Mom. Brownies becomes Explorers. Pretty much every illustration has the girls wearing shirts that says the word brownies. This word is erased in every single picture in the United States version of the book. I don't know why. Maybe there was some sort of legal trouble, so they couldn't use the word brownies in America, or they just were worried about being sued, so now the brownies are the explorers. That's the biggest change. Minibus becomes school bus. The church hall becomes a school. Rachel shouted, waving too, becomes Rachel shouted. She was waving too. Isn't it great of your brownie leader to let me come? Becomes, isn't it great that your explorer's leader is letting me come? I wouldn't leave you behind, laughed Kirsty. Becomes, there's no way I'd leave you behind, Kirsty laughed. Pack becomes troop, here and everywhere else. We joined up becomes we met up. There were loads of us becomes there were lots of us. There are lots of prizes becomes there were prizes too. Had a barbecue round the campfire becomes toasted marshmallows around the campfire. It was just a big party in the woods, really, becomes it really was just a big party in the woods. Of course is removed from the start of the sentence. Of course will have to be. Although becomes even though. Spiky Jack Frost becomes Prickly Jack Frost. His goblin helpers becomes his goblins. Jubilee becomes anniversary here and everywhere else. The 7 party fairies sentence is split up into 2 sentences by removing the word and. Spoil becomes ruin, then the party fairies would come, flying to the rescue, and becomes, then, when the party fairies came flying to the rescue. He intended becomes he planned, came to a standstill in a large woodland clearing becomes came to a stop in a large clearing in the woods. The other pack had clearly arrived first becomes the other troop had arrived. Get away with becomes steal. Spoil our day becomes ruin our day. Go and put becomes put. We'll start becomes then we'll start. A cheer went up from the brownies on the bus becomes the explorers on the bus cheered. Clamber out becomes leave. Mayhem becomes trouble. Spreading becomes giant. Round becomes around here and everywhere else. The sentence starting with we're going to start is split into 2 sentences. Obstacle race becomes obstacle course here and everywhere else. Shall we becomes should we. Raised plank becomes wooden balance beam. Run along a row becomes run along the top of a row. Score a goal through a netball hoop becomes make a shot through a basketball hoop here and elsewhere. In the illustrations, the netball is changed into a basketball. To finish off becomes to finish. Dinghy becomes boat here and everywhere else. Chuckled Rachel becomes Rachel replied with a laugh. Teams becomes teammates. Plank becomes beam. Rachel and then Kirsty and Emily becomes Rachel, Kirsty, and Emily. Safely across becomes across safely. Hair clip becomes barrette. Hopeless becomes horrible. Score becomes make baskets. 6 attempts becomes 6 more tries. Goal becomes basket. Jumped in becomes jumped into the little inflatable boat. Came running over becomes was running up. Gasped Kirsty becomes Kirsty gasped. Trainers becomes sneakers. The word rapidly is removed. Chapter 2. Will becomes we, which had just overtaken them. That phrase is removed. Trousers becomes pants here and everywhere else. The word now is removed. Mischief becomes trouble. Dinghies becomes rubber boats. Rubber becomes bottom of a boat. Gorse becomes prickly. Comfortingly on the arm becomes on the shoulder. Parcel becomes present here and everywhere else. Queued becomes lined up. Good fun becomes lots of fun. Laughed becomes said. And keep becomes and remember to keep. The sentence starting with Rachel had a steady is split into 2 sentences. The sentence "my eggs hatch" is swapped with the sentence after it. The race was forgotten becomes "everyone forgot the race." Well and "I suppose" are deleted. The sentence starting with "the brownie scattered" is split into two sentences. Puzzled becomes confused here and elsewhere. Declared becomes cried. Chapter 3. Vest becomes tank top. Belt and balloon becomes belt. Untidy is removed. Her hair must be clean in the American version. Bell-like voice becomes voice that tinkled like a bell. A bit sad becomes sad. I've lost becomes I lost. Grinned cheekily becomes gave a little giggle. Has stolen becomes stole. Not looking at all worried becomes not looking worried at all. About is deleted. Somewhere becomes somewhere nearby. Carry on becomes keep. Pop becomes put. Indicating becomes pointing to. It was good fun becomes it was fun. Got hold becomes gotten a hold. Brownies becomes girls. Biscuits becomes cookies here and everywhere else. Tinkling becomes tiny. The sentence starting with "the girls looked up" is split into two sentences. There was Polly perched becomes Polly was perched. Can becomes could. Downwards becomes downward. The sentence starting with "she and Rachel" is split into two sentences. Looking around for the frisbee is added to the end of the first of the two sentences. But as they did so becomes as they did. The girls whirled around to face her. She pointed to a spot nearby is added after cried out in alarm. Chapter 4. Emerged becomes climb out. Catch a glimpse of him as he raced becomes see the goblin race. Chuckled gleefully becomes giggled with glee. Horrid becomes horrible. Called crossly becomes yelled. After him becomes let's catch him. Giving chase becomes starting to run. Towards becomes toward here and elsewhere. Beaten becomes giving up. The sentence starting with panting is split into two sentences at the word like, and the word like is changed to it floated like. Launched it onto becomes placed it on. There becomes then. The word away is removed. Pleased with becomes proud of. Grinning all over becomes a grin stretching across. Haven't becomes didn't. The word and is removed from the start of the sentence. Anxiously becomes nervously. Skimmed becomes flew. Alarmed becomes worried. Flew becomes fluttered. In pursuit is removed from the end of the sentence. To help them becomes that could help. Upturned becomes upside down. Formed becomes been. A paragraph break is added before the sentence starting with meanwhile. The sentence is split into two sentences at the word trying, which becomes she was trying. Snatch becomes grab. Till becomes until. Reaching out becomes and reached, which lay in the bottom of the frisbee becomes that was laying on the floor of the boat. Lashed out with his paddle becomes swung his paddle at Polly, and only just missed becomes barely missing. Had got to becomes could be. Spun round becomes turned around. As Rachel was now fairy-sized becomes being fairy-sized. She was finding it difficult becomes Rachel was having a hard time. Her becomes her friend. The sentence starting with both girls let go is split into two sentences at the word and is deleted from the sentence. At that moment becomes the same moment. Chapter 5. Everything's gone dark becomes it's too dark. The bottom of is removed. Began trying to shift becomes tried to push. Arms becomes hands. Stuck fast becomes stuck. Couldn't shake becomes couldn't quite shake. That's fixed to you becomes that should keep you busy. Drifting round and round becomes going around. Raged becomes demanded. The word crossly is removed, as is the word but. She beamed, hugging it close, becomes she said with a smile, hugging the bag close. No problem becomes our pleasure. Moaning becomes mumbling. Drag becomes pull. Suggested Rachel becomes Rachel suggested. The unnecessary quotation mark after the word tightly is deleted. And that's probably the only legitimate change in this book. There was a grammar issue. Unnecessary quotation mark. I'm glad they got rid of it. Don't want becomes I don't want. Muttered sulkily becomes pouted. Laughing becomes giggling. The sentence that starts with and now I'd better removes the word and moves now to the end of the phrase. Gave a shout becomes stopped her. Hello becomes hi. Hovering in midair becomes still hovering there. Fascinated becomes delighted. Asked Rachel becomes Rachel asked. And with that, she vanished is changed into a separate paragraph. Chapter 6. The first sentence is split into two sentences at the word but, and the word but is removed. Were becomes were gone. That was certainly true becomes that's true. Have your juice and biscuits becomes eat your snack. In the same sentence, parcel becomes both box and present in that order. Bit becomes little. Think becomes figured out. Where it's got to becomes where it could be. I've becomes I. On the minibus becomes still on the bus. They thought they knew becomes they knew. Come along becomes gather around. Nearest becomes closest. When she did so becomes when she did. Were floating becomes floated. Each other becomes one another. Chuckling becomes giggling. Was taking any notice becomes was paying attention to her. Eager becomes excited. A layer of wrapping becomes another layer. The sentence starting with this time is split into two sentences after the word paper. The word and is deleted. Floated down becomes they sparkled and floated down. With becomes at. Tore a layer of paper off becomes tore off a layer of paper. The sentence starting with she tore off is split into two sentences after the word fireworks. Filling becomes they filled. Any more surprises becomes any surprises. Heaps of sweets becomes pile of candy. Spilled out becomes spilled. The sentence starting with the brownies cheered is moved to another paragraph. Whispered to herself becomes whispered. We've becomes we. And that's it. By my count, that is over 200 changes for a 65-page book, or 3.18 changes per page. The actual number of changes is much higher if you include every instance of the word brownies being changed.